actually, I also appreciate the fact that a few of you have stayed to watch this. So we try to be a little bit unconventional, and I thought I'd start by just telling you what JT or Jersey Telecom is not. I think the first thing to say is we're not New Jersey Telecom. We're actually Old Jersey Telecom. We're not a small carrier you've never heard of from the east coast of the States. We're actually from a small island in between France and England. And we're the incumbent operator there. We do fixed, mobile, broadband hosting services. Because of our size, we don't have the cash, frankly, to fund innovation funds in the valley, to have an incubator facility here. But likewise, I don't think we're very pretentious, and we don't have a kind of large, difficult decision-making structure to cope with. Which kind of brings me on to what we are. And we are, I think, more than anything else, small, fast and agile. We make quick decisions and we seek to work and partner very quickly with innovators to bring services to market. Now, we're pretty technologically advanced. One of our big customer groups in Jersey is financial services. And those customers demand really resilient, secure, high-speed services. And that's one of the reasons why we're in the process of putting in a completely 100% fibre gigabit network across the island. Something we've been working on for a couple of years and will be finished within the next 2 years. And that's led us into this thing we call JT WAN. Something else that the island is maybe not famous for, but it does, is it's been used by a lot of FMCG companies to test products and services. So, for example, the first place that Coca-Cola test marketed Sprite was on Jersey. And we are basically throwing open our network to allow businesses that have got services, particularly that work over kind of high-speed networks, to come and commercially test the service. So, you know, you've all got access to testing things technically, but we think there's very few places in the world where you can actually test and see how does something work commercially, what does a pricing model work, and so on and so forth. So in a couple of minutes, that's a little bit about us.
Okay, got one more.
I do have one more.
By the way, on that last slide,
yeah,
that's strikeout. That's an error, right?
That was an error. It wasn't in the pack that we reviewed a few minutes ago.
We mistakenly added strikeout funds to your website. You're claiming tier one. You're not claiming not tier one.
Correct.
Excellent. Okay.
Correct. That was why I was in the slide that said what we are.
Yeah.
And actually, so this is innovation and what we're looking for. Actually, the first thing I'm looking for is someone who can come up with a foolproof way of making things like PowerPoint work, so that when you transfer from one device to another, you don't get the strikeout in the wrong place. But moving on from that, where do we see a lot of innovation coming from at the moment? We're very interested in cloud, particularly residency services. One of the issues for a lot of our customers is they need to know that their data is secure and on Jersey. And I think that this is going to be an increasing trend where, you know, when you hear things like kind of Snowden and all the NSA stuff and so on, I think increasingly customers, it's not sufficient for data to be in the cloud. They want to know where it is in the cloud, where in the world it is, as well as many other things. And so we're certainly interested in people who've got technologies who can help us demonstrate to our customers that the data that's in our cloud on Jersey is staying in our cloud on Jersey and not going anywhere else. I've mentioned the gigabit fibre network already. Another area that one or two of my kind of carrier colleagues have commented on is end-to-end. I have to say, end-to-end is the one area of our business where I need a logarithmic scale to plot the sales growth. And I think it's, you know, this sort of Internet of Things is really happening, and from a carrier perspective, I'm very excited about it. I really do think it's kind of the next big thing for us. I think that's probably enough, but I think I should...
Let me jump in, Graeme, and ask you a couple of questions, though, about your island. First of all, interesting things, it's the average income on the island.
The average income, I know that according to Wikipedia, that great source of all knowledge,
can't be wrong.
We are the sixth richest, we've got the sixth highest income per head of population on the planet. So it's substantial.
And we're really flipping a corner from talking about Telenor's Indian markets with 250 ARPUs to what can be achieved in Jersey, right?
Yeah, I mean, for example, just about everyone has got a smartphone. The penetration of smartphones is way in excess of 80%, for example.
Yeah. You've got to not want one to not have one, essentially.
Pretty much.
And then with respect to the cloud stuff and the post-node era, are you finding an increase in demand? People coming up to this in the middle of Jersey more closely now because in the post-node era we're worried about this?
I would say almost the opposite. I think in the post-node era, we're seeing people wanting to kind of hold on their data and not put it in the cloud, period.
Yeah. Until we sort it out.
Yeah.
All right, great. Thanks for those simple questions running off of that. Let's flip it over to Will, and we've got some slides as well.
Great.
Introduce us to Lincoln.
Appreciate it. Thank you for having us here, by the way. And I decided to stick with Graeme's theme, if I may be so bold. It occurs to me in the world of big data analytics, one often needs to explain who they are or not. And I'll give you some examples of what we are not as a company, and we'll talk in a minute about what we are and the things we're doing with Jersey. So we're not a cloud company. We don't sell cloud infrastructure. We're not a hardware company. We're not here to sell things that they can buy for millions and millions of dollars, and we're happy for someone to pay that, of course. It doesn't usually happen. We're not a Hadoop-based company, but we understand technology with respect to Hadoop, what it can do, the role that it plays in emerging networks. And we're also not a consulting company in terms of, in a big data world, throwing more and more bodies at problems oftentimes just creates new problems. And the interesting thing about this particular graphic, what you see there is essentially a few people putting together something that ultimately ought to be probably run by a machine. So to tell you a little bit about who we are, I think it's important, or instructive anyway, to say what we believe. And this is the opportunity, we think, with respect to big data, particularly as it relates to communications companies. Big data is disruptive. So for every one problem that's solved today using big data, there's 99 others or more that are either unsolved or undersolved. And to give you a quick example of that, the world of market research and communication space, you wanted to know what someone's network experience was, you had to call them, you had to survey them, you had to try to talk to them to understand that. Today, that's not the case. It's measurable. You can look inside the network if you can leverage your data. You can understand network experience in ways that you were never able to before because of big data. We see the problems being solved by big data a couple of different ways. We see big companies, some of the companies in this room, certainly a lot of the OTT players solving big data analytical problems. In fact, that's often where we fight for with respect to talent. The last few people we've hired, computer scientists, mathematicians, graph theorists, and others have been applying and sought after by folks like Google, Twitter, Yahoo, and others. So the talent that we're finding in this space is increasingly more and more expensive. Unfortunately, it's harder and harder to find. Where we're, of course, betting as a startup company, and where I would place my bet if I had to, not just with companies like us, but thousands and ultimately millions of companies like us, is in the startup model, where you have companies that are in business to solve one specific problem with respect to data extremely well. And I think it's tougher and tougher for communications companies, no matter how big you are, no matter what your budgets are, to try to solve all the big data problems yourselves, simply because there are better ways to try to do it. You're a communications company, and sometimes you can do these things on your own, of course, and sometimes it's best to do these things with partners. So in order to address the disruptive marketplace that we think is out there and address communications in general, we have really two ways we bring things to the marketplace. We have existing products that we built that are really centered around ultimately what we call network data. So we have a suite of solutions called MIME, which is monetizing intelligence from network events, that address problems like competitive intelligence, telling big carriers things and small carriers things about their competitors and their competitors' customers that they can't otherwise know. Customer experience, I sort of alluded to that at the beginning of the discussion, and also in the world of network transformation, which we'll talk about with Graeme in terms of some of the things that we're doing. And the other way that we tackle it is in probably something that most folks don't think of, is what we call analytical engines, which is a business to say, as we said in the very beginning, there are so many problems that have been unsolved there is not existing software or solutions to try to solve it. But they have to be solved with repetitive big data technology in order to make this work for a carrier grade type of company. So that's what we bring to the table, and ultimately we do a few of these things in partnership with Jersey Telecom.
I guess that's where I'd like to go with the case study. So let's get into it. Graeme, what was the need that you guys had that was unfulfilled when you met at Link Analytics?
Well, there were a couple of areas that we're working on with Link. One of it was just sort of the basic necessity of getting data about our own market share. It's quite complex, although it's a small market, it's very complex. Fixed mobile broadband hosting is a lot of competition, and because of the size of the market, it's very difficult to use sort of traditional market research techniques, and they're expensive as well. So we really...
So you're saying we're cheap?
You were cheaper, yeah.
Well, that's good and bad.
I didn't say you were cheap.
Well said.
So that was really where the dialogue was started.
Yeah. So you're looking in Jersey. You guys are out of Atlanta. That's a natural occurrence. So you must have. Was this the Heathrow bar or something like that? How'd you guys cross paths?
Actually, we're both partners, development partners, and other ways they partner with Intel. So Intel is in the business of very big ecosystems, and we met through a mutual partner, and it's been a good relationship.
Actually, it's maybe worth saying through a mutual partner here at this event a year ago.
Excellent. Even better then. So there's been a 1-year introduction and procedure. That sounds really good. How did that procedure take place since it's been out 365 days or so? What's happened in the course of that time? And how have you found working with Jersey Telecom in that time?
Well, so a couple of things. Working with Jersey Telecom is unlike any other telecom. If I may be so bold. We work with all the big telecoms in the U.S. We work with several of the smaller companies in the U.S. as well, just starting across Western Europe, although pretty immature in that space for us. So working with Jersey is, it's shocking when you walk into a room and you've got 6 out of the 8 top decision makers of the company who are there to actually make decisions oftentimes that day. Then you've got privacy folks in the room, you've got the chief executive officer, you've got the technology officer and others that say, do we want to do this? Do we want to spend money or not? Can we do this? If so, what are the implications? And so what that means for companies like us, well really anybody for this matter, is efficiency. You have an idea, they'll listen to the idea and they're going to be very, very honest if it's something that they think is going to resonate in the marketplace or not.
Now I know that JT has kind of has 2 roles that it represents here to Silicon Valley. One is you can be a fantastic test bed as a kind of isolated ecosystem, and the second one is you're also a telco in your space. It sounds to me like you're serving them in their second capacity as the national telco, as opposed to as a test bed for their reach, right?
Well, there's several things. So I'll run through them quickly. One is with other partners building Hadoop-based infrastructure to help them think about the concept. So we talked earlier about network transformation. Well, Jersey, like many other communications companies, are trying to contemplate what are all the ways we can monetize data, what are the new services we can take into the marketplace. And if we're going to do that, we're going to have a brand new scalable data environment on which to put information and test new things. So we're helping them with respect to that data infrastructure. The next piece is, as Graeme had mentioned, installing some of our existing solutions. One of those is a competitive intelligence solution that leverages a lot of different network information. And the third, and really I think the most innovative, is working with these guys as a partner to say, what are the solutions driven by data that don't exist but could? One of those being a fraud detection solution that, oftentimes we think about fraud with respect to certainty, and it's nice when fraud is certain, but if you think about your financial services company and how an American Express is going to identify fraud, it's always probabilistic. And so what we're finding is with respect to the data that exists out there and things that you're doing on your phone, there are ways to try to know whether that person is actually you. And to the extent that we can identify whether or not people using the phone, for example, in this case, is actually you, we can mitigate a tremendous amount of fraud and wasted costs from carriers. And so this is basically taking an existing mathematical concept that we have and taking it with a data partner and seeing what can we build together first, can we then take that into the marketplace.
So they're a partner customer and they're a development partner.
Absolutely.
Context.
Yep. And furthermore, when we have the product, We've already had the conversations about the fact as JT, we have a sales force both in Europe and North America, something that actually that Will doesn't have or not as interesting.
I have a sales force, well, myself and one. So there's about 45 of us in the company, but we don't have, we're busy doing things. We don't have a big sales force.
So there's a development part of it, and actually, I think we're both hoping that we can actually also help bring it to market in due course.
Great. So you're coming very much as a partner in that potential new line of business.
Yeah.
And not almost like a vendor partner as opposed to a telco partner.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of looking at it.
How's it been the past year working with a startup like that?
Well, from our perspective, it's been very refreshing. Lots of sort of fresh, energetic ideas. Lots of exposure also to sorts of new technology and so on. To be honest, that it would take us years and ever to kind of get around to. And it was nice of Will to say that we make quick decisions, we try and do that. But I also have to say that Link also have moved very rapidly. That, you know, unlike a lot of, in some ways, other vendors we work with, when they say they're going to do something, they do. And again, they're very quick to say what they can do and what they can't do. And again, I think we've all got experiences with vendors who will basically say yes to everything, and you're going to find out later on that it doesn't work.
Right, and scale up or can't deliver. Tell me a little bit about, so this is something you're working on as the GT Lab team then, as one of the owners of it. What else are you doing in GT Lab and how's that going?
Okay, so it's going pretty well. I mean, some of your regular attendees may remember that a couple of years ago Tim Ringstall gave a little bit of a presentation on here. So in terms of the physical rollout, we have passed 70%. We've been going physically for 20 months. We've passed 70% of the properties on the island with fibre, and we've connected up the first 16-17%. And by kind of sometime in 2016, we will be completed 100%. And JT Lab's done well. We've attracted interest, and we've got people now coming in from China who are using it. We've got a number of Israeli companies. Will mentioned it. There's a relationship, a bit of a partnership going on with Intel, and of course other Silicon Valley companies, well actually Silicon Valley American companies like Link.
Sounds pretty good. There's a lot of traction. And that's in just a short amount of time, right? So JT Lab was kicked off and launched when?
About 2 years ago now. So yeah, it's, as we say, we kind of like to move quickly on these things. And we have found, I mean, it's maybe worth saying that when we launched it, we thought what people would find most interesting is the fibre. What we've actually found is that people have just found us easier than most of the mega carriers to deal with. And it's that agility and approachability, I think, that's been more interesting to many people than some of the technology that we thought would attract them.
It's so important to, for a startup or entrepreneur and to get your first customer, improve your scalability, your telco reliability. Then it becomes a lot easier to go, one step further to British Telecom or Orange across the water and say, listen, we're real. Here's our test bed. I want you to nip over to the island and check it out, and then you'll see that this is a legitimate product or service. So with that, Will, have you found that the experience of JT has helped you in terms of credibility with subsequent customers in the market?
Absolutely, and that's a very big piece of it when you're small. Is irrespective of how good some of our stuff may be and maybe the ROI that it drives, particularly in the States, it's always harder to then take that over to Western Europe or Asia or wherever the case may be. So to the extent that we have proof points in a place like Jersey that say this is exactly what we said we were going to do, we did it, it worked well, it demonstrates a model for working overseas, and of course invaluable in that is the relationship with JT and their willingness to open doors, and particularly into Western Europe. And I think that's really the interesting thing, the most interesting thing, maybe not, but very interesting about JT is they've got, 100,000 customers on the island?
Yeah.
As a company, there's certainly growth with respect to that customer base and machine-to-machine, as Graeme had mentioned, but it is their capacity to connect different telcos and other institutions throughout the globe. It's also a growth strategy for them. And that's what makes them, I think, a partner, not just for companies like us, but for all kinds of companies in Silicon Valley.
Great. I got 3 good questions that I want to make sure I don't miss asking you. And we're running out of time, so we've got to whip through them. But one of the distinctions about JT is the regulatory environment and the government you work with. Talk a little bit about how the government is involved in the innovation on that.
Yeah, sure. So we are outside the EU, even though we're in Europe. That means that we don't have to worry about EU legislation, although there is a regulator for us. And the government has recently launched an $8 million innovation fund. So like many places, that they're seeking to make kind of loans and grants to technology companies to try and attract them to Jersey. And that's really kind of building on JT Lab and the investment that we're making in the fund.
I mean, in many ways, the government of Jersey is analogous to you guys. A small organization, being everybody in the room, and can make a decision that they think will bring progress really quickly, right?
Yeah, the analogy is very strong, and it's not uncommon for kind of the Treasury Minister, the Economic Development Minister, even the Chief Minister to kind of meet new companies coming to the island. So you know, there's quite a nice kind of friendly family feel to it, and again, there's an agility that amongst the civil servants that you wouldn't normally associate with civil servants.
So Graeme, you mentioned that the biggest companies, you set up incubators here and have big offices. That's not what Jersey has the budget for, the intention to do. And that makes a lot of sense. We see a number of companies saying, well, we want a presence, but it's not going to be a 50-person lab or a big facility like that. But you know, what do you offer to the companies in Silicon Valley? How do you propose to connect with them and bring their innovation back?
Okay, well we have, I think most people in the room know that we've got a kind of long-standing relationship with Brit, who's out there. We've got another colleague, Mark Stutchfield, who is, funnily enough, a JT employee in Jersey, but is also an American citizen. And Mark is getting to enjoy the inside of aeroplanes particularly much. Isn't that right, Mark? And Mark, stick your hand up.
Come on, let me show you.
And then, of course, you know, we are a communications company. This is the home of the internet. Guess what? Video and telephony works.
So I can Facebook.
Yeah.
All right, great. Brilliant. And you know, closing question, Will, you've got some broad views you're willing to bring to the table. So you've been in the analytics space most of your career. What are the big analytics and big data opportunities that we're missing so far?
That's a big question. That's pun intended. I think that to put it broadly, not to get into any specifics here, is to say, I think communications companies oftentimes see, it's not big data, it's ultimately what it can do. Nobody really cares about big data. I mean, there's some companies that do, they build out the technology that handles it, but ultimately it's what you can do with it. I think the distinction, and I think you'll see this across time, is it's not just that data can help you do things a little bit better. I think data unto itself is going to become its own vertical. And so inside of communications companies, I think you're going to see chief analytics officers and others, C-level executives that are brought in to do something very differently with a fundamental mindset shift than exists inside the communication space today. And I think that's the right thing to do, because I think that there are products that no one's even thought of that could exist. And with the right math and high performance computing and access